For years I've been fascinated by this Exodus story and whether or not there is evidence that it actually happened. So far, archaeologists haven't found evidence that hundreds of thousands of people fled Egyptian slavery and journeyed through the Sinai Desert, but there are some interesting findings that could support a smaller number of people making that journey around the end of the Late Bronze Age. We'll get to that evidence at the end of this video, but first I wanted to sketch a hypothetical Exodus route that I've put together from a close reading of the Exodus story. The starting point of the journey is a place called Pi-Ramesses. Exodus 12:37 says, "And the people of Israel journeyed from Ramesses to Succoth." This first place, Pi-Ramesses or Ramesses, was a city that was built up as the new capital of Egypt under Ramesses II, who was believed by some to be the pharaoh of the Exodus. Ramesses II moved the capital of Egypt to Pi-Ramesses so he could better position Egypt to compete with the rival Hittite Empire to the north. Another point of connection between the Israelites and Ramesses, or Pi-Ramesses, comes from Exodus 1:11, which says, "Therefore the Egyptians set taskmasters over the Israelites to afflict them with heavy burdens. They built for Pharaoh store cities, Pithom and Ramses." It's possible Ramesses could have used slave labor in some of the building projects to upgrade Pi-Ramesses, pulling people from the nearby city of Avaris, which was the old Hyksos capital. More on this at the end of the video, but the Hyksos could have been one of the populations that the Israelites originated from. No one has discovered the location of Succoth yet, which is the second stop, but it could have been in this general area, so we'll just pick a spot that looks like it has some ruins. The reason I'm picking this spot is because the Israelites might have moved along Wadi Tumilat to leave Egypt. This ancient distributary of the Nile later became the Canal of the Pharaohs. As a disclaimer, this is just a hypothetical route that I'm tracing, and I don't mean to imply that this is the exact route the Israelites traveled. Now let's zoom out to get a picture of where they could have headed next. Exodus 13:17-20 says, "When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, 'Lest the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt.' But God led the people around by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea. And the people of Israel went up out of the land of Egypt equipped for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph with him, for Joseph had made the sons of Israel solemnly swear, saying, 'God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones with you from here.' And they moved on from Succoth and encamped at Etham, on the edge of the wilderness." So the land of the Philistines was here in Philistia, and since Egypt is right behind them, the only route the Israelites could have gone by the way of the wilderness toward the Red Sea is south. And interestingly enough, there was a major ancient highway here called the King's Highway. If the Israelites actually did start their journey in this area, it's likely they used this highway. Next we have Exodus 13 verse 20. and they moved on from Sukkoth and encamped at Etham on the edge of the wilderness. We also don't know where Etham is, but on the edge of the wilderness probably means this area right here, before the desert mountains begin. Let's put up a quick navigation guide to visualize the stops of the Exodus journey we've discussed so far. After Etham, there's a change in direction. Exodus 14, 1-3 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea. In front of Baal-zephon you shall encamp facing it by the sea. For Pharaoh will say of the people of Israel, They are wandering in the land, the wilderness has shut them in." In this context, I think turn back probably means turn south, and I'll show why in a bit. Again, this is all my theory, but there's a path up here where the Israelites could have disappeared from view behind this elevation and turned south, only emerging after they had left visual range of any Egyptians who were tracking them. Here you can see where they would have emerged out of visual range of any Egyptians monitoring them as they traveled on the King's Highway. The Bible doesn't say that the Egyptians were monitoring them as they left, but I wonder if they were. And if the Israelites gave the Egyptians the slip by turning suddenly south off the King's Highway and disappearing from view, that would make sense why it apparently took some time for the Egyptians to find the Israelites once they set out after them, since the chariot-based Egyptian army would have been much faster than the Israelites traveling with their young, old, and towing all their belongings. Next, I think they went all the way to the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula. I have to admit, this leg of the journey is probably the toughest part of my route to justify, because it's a long trek through the desert, and even though this area was populated during the Late Bronze Age, it's unclear how many water sources there were. But this route is actually walkable. You can even find a path on Google Maps. Obviously, we see modern roads here, which wouldn't have existed at the time, but the overall terrain seems flat enough to navigate on foot. Another reason this part of my route is the hardest to justify is because the stopping points listed for the Exodus journey in the books of Exodus and Numbers are usually within a day of each other, a day's journey on foot being between 15 to 20 miles. The narrations in both the books of Exodus and Numbers are very thorough, and it seems like every stop is listed at the end of the day's march. But if the Israelites did travel all this way south to get to Pi-hahiroth, according to my theory, it would be strange because there's no mention of any stopping places before they get there, and the distance involved here would take a couple days at least. One explanation could be that they camped by the Red Sea whenever they stopped, in which case maybe the authors didn't record those stops to avoid repeating, and then they camped by the sea, and then they camped by the sea. Whatever the case, this is probably the weakest part of my theory, but you'll see why I think it makes sense in a minute. There are some springs here. Who knows if they were around in ancient times? But what if the Israelites took a quick detour to refill their water supplies? At this point, we have gone further south than where Christianity's traditional location for Mount Sinai is at. This traditional location is at St. Catherine's Monastery in the mountains of the Sinai Peninsula. I believe that the location we get to at the end of this video is a stronger candidate for Mount Sinai. So for the location of the next stop, Pi-hahiroth, let's look at Exodus 14:2 again. Tell the people of Israel to turn back and encamp in front of Pi-hahiroth, between Migdol and the sea, in front of Baal-zephon. You shall encamp facing it by the sea. Those are a lot of very specific directions with a lot of different places mentioned. As far as I know, none of these places have been identified definitively, but we can make some educated guesses to where they were. First, Pi-hahiroth could mean mouth of the gorges or mouth of the sea, although this is debated. It could also mean the place where sedge grows, or it could refer to a place that had a temple for a goddess. I think this general area is the best candidate for a mouth of the gorges or mouth of the sea because it sits at the convergence of both the Gulf of Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba with the Red Sea. And if Pi-hahiroth means the place where sedge grows, this area is also the most likely because there's a freshwater lake in this area with some reeds and grasses growing out of it. The next name, Baal-zephon, provides another clue that this area could be where the Israelites made camp. Baal-zephon was considered a protector of maritime trade, and what better place to protect maritime trade than here, on this southernmost tip of the Sinai Peninsula, which overlooks the entrance to the Gulfs of Suez and Aqaba, and the entire northern Red Sea. The next place name we'll discuss is Migdol. Migdol could mean a fortified, elevated place, like a watchtower or fortress. I think this area is a good place to have a fortress or watchtower because of its strategic location overlooking such a major junction for seaborne trade. So I think this area is the best candidate for a place that is 1. In front of Pi-hahiroth, the mouth of the gorges or mouth of the sea, 2. Between Migdol, a watchtower or fort, and the sea, and 3. In front of Baal-zephon. Another interesting point is that the translation for the Red Sea is sometimes argued to be the Sea of Reeds, which I think is interesting again in light of the reeds that were growing out of the freshwater lake that we saw earlier. So if the Israelites camped in this area, and the Egyptians came through here, that would leave only one place for the Israelites to escape, since they would definitely be shut in by the wilderness, as Pharaoh said. It would have been genuinely terrifying to be in the Israelites' position, trapped between desert mountains and the sea and bracing for a fight with probably the most powerful military in the world at the time. This picture is an actual view from the southern tip of the Sinai Peninsula, taken from Google Earth, just to give a perspective of what it might have been like to be confronted by the oncoming Egyptians. The chariots of Egypt's New Kingdom were the tanks of the ancient world, and this chariot force had just crushed the powerful Hittite army at the Battle of Kadesh in 1274 BC. The Egyptian military could have been at the historical apex of its power, and there was no chance for the Israelites to escape here. Unless you believe the Exodus story, where something truly miraculous happened next. Interestingly, some older videos on possible Exodus routes have suggested that there could have been a land bridge that the Israelites could have crossed the Gulf of Aqaba near Nuweiba Beach. But there's actually nothing that could be considered a land bridge anywhere in the Gulf of Aqaba, except for right at the southernmost point, where I think the Israelites camped at Pi Hahiroth. This is a view looking across the sea from this point, taken again from Google Earth. And I have to wonder, did the Israelites see this same location? So could the Red Sea crossing have looked like this?
Alleluia,